All right, thank you, Brandy. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Thursday, November 21st, 2024 Watertown Board of Adjustment meeting. Brandy, can you help with the roll call?
Yes, Colhane,
Present.
Dargis Johnson,
Here.
Ford,
Here.
Dolly,
Here.
Kays,
Here.
Brink,
Here.
and Aletsky Inspire absent. We do have a quorum.
Today on the agenda, we have a few variance items. We will need an affirmative vote of 5 of the 6 board members for those variance approvals to move forward. Move on to item 3 on the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion for that? A
Second.
motion and a second. Discussion on the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Any, any opposed? Okay, the agenda is approved. We'll move on to item 4A, the approval of the minutes from the November 7th, 2024 meeting. Need a motion on that.
So moved.
Have a motion?
Second.
Second by Dargis Johnson. All in favor of those minutes?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Those are approved. Move on to item 5A on the regular agenda. Brandy, I'll let you take us through that.
Okay, thank you, Blake. So there's a couple variance requests here, and this is for the Allen Mitchell Complex, which is the new stadium across from the Boys and Girls Club and the high school there on the north side of Third. So that, in working with the signage for that property, there's just a couple things, and obviously this is in an R3 multifamily residential district, and it's an institutional use. An institutional use covers schools or religious institutions or apartments, things that are more institutional in nature, but still in a residential district. So in this scenario, obviously a very large lot, and I'll pull it up on GIS too. For a typical R3 lot, at the minimum being 10,000 square feet. And this property to be continued there, let that load. So the requests here are for a roof sign to be installed, and this would, and I'll show you the areas there. And then also for the overall wall sign area within that institutional use in the R3 district to be 20% instead of the 7.5% that is allowed. And that is consistent with what a C3 highway commercial property would be for wall signage. I'll show you guys here. And I will get that overall. Well, and it's not that entire property. Hold on here, guys. Sorry. All right, so if we take a measurement of just where the stadium itself is and the area, an approximate measurement here. So we're looking at about 600,000 square feet, which anybody has some quick mental math? I don't. So about 14 acres of property here, which obviously when you have, the more land you have, the more area that you're going to have for signage that is not going to necessarily look out of place or be intrusive. The other thing to keep in mind with this property is there are commercial properties or the school and the Boys and Girls Club on the south side, and then there are apartment buildings to the west. And where the signage is being proposed, it will not be facing, no, sorry, that's to the east. Where the signage is being proposed, it will not be facing residential districts. So overall, then we have this rendering of where the signage will be located, and I'm not sure, but if the applicant, I think they have more renderings that give a better idea to show kind of this, the proposed signage. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
So the percentage here that we're talking about, the 7.5, this is the percentage of wall area. It doesn't have any relation to the size of the property, the square footage of the total property,
Correct.
just the size of the structure.
Yep.
So which direction will the sign be facing?
So it'll be facing, the larger amount of signage will be facing south towards Third.
Towards the school, towards the high school?
Yep. Yeah, there's a small like logo on the east side, nothing on the west, and then they have interior signage. But the signage is, and you can see this on the chart that I provided on the background, where on the south side, that's where the majority of the signage is being proposed, because they will have a larger Watertown arrows.
Sign at the northeast corner of the lot with a,
No, on the south. Yeah, when they open the public hearing.
and this sign's not an illuminated sign. It's not, I mean, it's not a motion sign, it's not an electric message display sign,
It will be lighted.
but not electric,
No, not like not a,
electronic messaging sign.
yes, an EMC.
We do have public hearings on this, so I will open that at this time if the applicant's here to speak on behalf.
Yeah. And actually, I'll give you.
Hello, my name is Jason Can. I'm an architect with Co-op Architecture. So we're working on the project with the school district. And just a quick explanation of what we're kind of going for here. So as Brandy explained, there's two different things we're asking for. I'll start with the roof sign that is over the gateway component of where you enter the stadium. And essentially that is, it's a part roof over a little ticket booth piece, and then it's just kind of a big sort of canopy over the top of the entrance portion, just like this right here. That signage, the intent with that, as we kind of went through the design with this, a lot of the discussion with staff and community members and things like that was a really strong desire to sort of carry over some elements of the old stadium, the existing stadium right now. So the hope with this was that we could mimic the Watertown Arrow, or the Watertown Stadium signage that exists at the current stadium on that canopy that kind of wraps around the curve, kind of mimic the same font style, spacing, sizing, that type of stuff. It would just be an illuminated letter kind of attached to the top of that component, similar to that, to just kind of carry a little of that heritage over. From a visual standpoint, it would look very similar to what is on the ice arena, just from a structural standpoint, and kind of how it would be a very similar light to those. An illuminated front, there's no framing or anything sort of behind it that kind of creates, it's just kind of a letter that's mounted to the top of the top of that structure there.
Brandy, can you point to where it's going to be? It's not shown on here, correct?
No, it is.
It's,
It's white.
It's really hard to see against the clouds
oh,
there.
there, it's in the cloud.
So this is a better idea too, this rendering here. It's further back, so this isn't one that is a part of this overall signage because interior signage doesn't count, but that's an idea of what it looks like and kind of, it's odd, in our ordinance, and we've seen this come before us before for a variance for the Watertown dispensary where they had a roof sign. And the thing about it is really like the aesthetic and safety for why roof signs are prohibited. However, it would be something that we could add to ordinance as far as if somebody would like to utilize a roof sign, that they have engineered stamped drawings and that can even be a condition that the structure can withstand the environmental factors.
So can you go back to the other slide now that I can see that it's in the clouds? All right, thank you so much. And it's going to be white?
Correct. It's white. So there's a dark sort of canopy piece on the top, and then the letters sit on top of it. And the letters are white, and then they illuminate it at night. The housing of it, I think, is going to be black, but the front face is white.
And then they illuminate it at night.
And then it illuminates at night, correct.
Is it lit every night or just, sorry, Chair, every night or just game nights?
That's a good question. I would assume they would probably light it more than game nights if that was, allowable. Probably most nights, but I'll be honest, we haven't really talked that too much about if it was just game nights or all the time.
Chair, another question. So how far back is it on, so if you've got a roof there, is it right on the edge or is there,
Yep, it's right on the front edge. Yep, pretty close to the front edge, yep. There's structural steel that kind of runs in there, and it'll be attached and mounted, connected to that, so that's where the steel beam is.
How far, Mr. Chair, how far is that structure from the curb?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Or the right-of-way?
Well, where will it be sitting in reference to the street?
I mean, I think it's,
I think it's about, it's 30 feet?
yeah, it is 30 feet because of the front yard setback for a structure.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. And Brandy, I guess my bigger question is, so we say that roof signs are not permitted in any city zoning district?
Yeah, they are just straight prohibited.
And so how is it that this board can grant a variance to something that's not prohibited? Wouldn't it take an ordinance amendment? Because what we would be doing by granting a variance would be giving it it'd be a use variance. We're saying we're okay with a roof sign where the ordinance says we're not allowed to grant or to have roof signs. And so that's where I'm struggling with this. I don't have the way it is, but I think,
Well, it's an appeal. So they're appealing the roof sign.
but how can we as a board grant a variance or an appeal to something that's not allowed by code?
Because I'm going to look it up here, but
Is there a s-
because I believe that that's how it's written in ordinance.
Would you pull that section up? Because I just want to know that we have the wherewithal to do that.
Yep.
21.8015, 8015. Prohibited signs. Following types of signs are expressly prohibited except as otherwise provided by this code. Number 7, roof signs.
Right, but where does the authority allow us to appeal a prohibited sign?
so, Chair? So
Yep.
how is the one being granted right now then that's on the stadium over there?
Well, it's predated. It's a non-conforming use.
I think the
was
question is
100
valid, though, in recent construction, too, because we also have a roof sign on top of the ice arena.
And that was a canopy sign.
It's on the top of the canopy, right?
Yeah, but it's not on top of the entire structure.
And that's what's different in this situation.
Yep. Are you good with how the appeal is stated then, Todd? Did you get that resolved?
Not yet, I just wondering, where, in the
Okay.
appeal section of the ordinance, where does it, what are the parameters or the boundaries that this board has to make a determination?
Okay, so yeah, under the prohibited signs here is where the roof signs.
Right.
And then for the sign appeals, the Board of Adjustment shall hear and decide appeals and decisions made by the administrative official under this chapter. The appellant shall notify that an appeal is being made for the purposes of this section. Any property located within 100 feet of the line located, appeal, such letter. So we actually sent it to 250, but, so you're still,
This is where I'm struggling, and this, it's not just, at the architect or the school. We, by and large, let's say, in the residential zone, gas stations are not a listed use. And Blake comes to us and says, well, and if something's not listed, it's prohibited, right? And Blake says, well, I want to come in and put a gas station in the residential zone, and comes to this board because I'm appealing and asking for a variance. And if this board would grant that, that would be commonly called a use variance. I see the same logic applying to this roof sign as well when it specifically says it's prohibited in any zoning district. I don't know we even have the wherewithal to issue a variance on an appeal. That's just I mean, the rest of the board can be where they're at, but that's where I'm struggling. I support the project, I just don't know how we go about making the decision.
So I would disagree that it's a use variance. I think that it would be, right now it's saying it's prohibited. It's kind of like if you can't meet the minimum lot size. Like,
No, no, a minimum lot size or an area requirement is specific to what a variance is. This is a specific use. The use is the
The
roof
sign.
sign. The sign is a use. It's an accessory
The
to the
structure.
structure. So that's how I mean, I don't want to get into semantics, but I know where I'm at right now solely based on that because I'm questioning.
Chair,
okay.
Yes, ma'am.
is it possible to get something from Lisa about this?
Well, this is how we brought forward the Dakota dispensary, or the dispensary of Watertown.
Could you we just refresh? I sat here, I just can't remember that decision off the top of my head. What would we do there?
We did not approve that.
Yeah, it was denied.
We didn't approve it.
Yeah, because of how the parapet and the construction was not,
To code or something?
yeah, was
There were
not.
some safety concerns there, and I know that was one of the things that the city brought up at the time too, and the reason for the prohibition of the roof signs was
Right.
the safety consideration there. I'm with you though, Brandy. I think if this is engineered right and you can prove that it's engineered right, we probably should be able to allow it, but in order to do that, I think we need to actually solve that in ordinance, not through an appeal.
Yes, and I agree, and that's how ordinance amendments come about.
Yep.
And that is included in the ordinance amendments that I'll talk about in new business.
Okay. We do have Liam on here with his hand up. I just want to acknowledge that.
I don't claim to be an architect, nor do I claim to have any great handle on the sign ordinance, despite having been somewhat involved in it. But if they just put a parapet or something behind this, does that solve the roof sign issue such that it's not the high, you know what I mean? I'm looking at a picture of the Prairie Lakes Ice Arena. I'm trying to figure out a way to make this work.
That's right, that is right, Liam.
So, I mean, if there's a parapet behind this particular quote roof sign, and it is no longer a roof sign, is that right?
Correct. The biggest thing though is like just I think the aesthetic component of what they're going for.
Correct. I mean, if it's not allowable as is, the idea was that we were trying to carry over this kind of same thin canopy line with, the text, the Watertown Arrows stuff on top of it, similar to the existing stadium, is just kind of a nod to the heritage of the Watertown Arrows there. Obviously we can look at different solutions if we have to. It wouldn't sort of align with the hoped intent of what that looked like.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
When is the expected construction time for this improvement on the property?
The construction will be complete this summer. So this sign doesn't have to be installed till this spring. It hasn't been manufactured. We haven't completed some of that stuff, so we have a little bit of time with that. The other one which I can get into in a little bit here, is probably a little bit more time sensitive from our perspective, just because of some wiring stuff that's
Well,
going on.
let me tell you where I'm at.
Yeah.
Is that I like the design, I like the concept, I just don't think we have the authority to do it. And that's my own feeling, sitting on the board. And if it goes down and we were to come back and make a recommendation to change the ordinance, I have a pretty good idea you wouldn't need to see us again because it would be allowed. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
And I'll just let you guys know that staff perspective is that it wouldn't be in front of you if we didn't think it was appropriate.
So I guess are we going to allow roof signs everywhere by,
I don't know, I'm just saying, if there was a policy in place, maybe it's only for institutional signs or government-owned signs, I mean, that's another discussion to be had.
That's what ultimately would have to come out in the ordinance discussion, and amendment to any ordinance. But yeah, we have historically denied these. We just recently denied one with the Watertown Dispensary for safety reasons. If they are allowable based on some engineering standards or something like that, that should all be documented and should be
that
playing by
would-
the same rules, so.
I do think that roof signs are aesthetically pleasing, and that as long as they're engineered and they have a stamp, that they are structurally sound from our environment, yeah, I think they can be a nice
I agree.
option.
Yep,
Yep.
I agree completely.
But I think we need some guidelines and parameters.
Yeah,
And we have
for sure.
none.
Well, we
Yeah.
one that says that they're prohibited in town.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I think even without that roof sign, in my mind, fulfilling the heritage doesn't equal a hardship anyway. And we need a hardship. And fulfilling heritage, the field will still be used in all manner, sign or not.
Correct.
Whether the sign is there or not might detract from someone who wanted the sign, but the field will still be perfectly useful.
You're correct.
So,
I'd like to move on from the conversation around the roof sign, though, and recognize that there is another request related to this property and the total wall sign area. Give the applicant a chance to address that as well.
Yeah, so the other portion of this, the field house facility, which is on the east side of that, so we just looked at the ticket booth kind of entrance piece, which is a little bit further west. As you go east, there's a locker room, concessions, all the other stuff on there. On the side facing Third Avenue, we would like to utilize a large portion of that to have a large lit Watertown Arrows sign on there. And then the intent is the background behind that, there's been a lot of discussion. So this in this rendering here, the original idea was that there was gonna be some sort of mural or, letters kind of painted on there, some sort of signage, something painted on there that wasn't actually lit signage. As we've had some discussions with this and talked to some community members, got some input, I think there's an idea that we would like to try to do a mural that maybe carries some of the language from the existing stadium over. So some of the profiles of that, kind of across the back of that facade, and then have lit letters that spell Watertown Arrows out kind of over the front of it, that sort of light that as a nice mural piece that kind of tries to tie the old stadium to the new stadium with, some graphics to, kind of celebrate the Watertown Arrows and the athletic events there, so. That's and basically the gist of it is, it's a pretty large sign that, when we spell that out in big letters and kind of do it all the way across that central portion of that, so there's a kind of a metal panel piece that wraps down the end, and then there's a ribbon window that runs across there, and we would like to do it on the section underneath the ribbon window there like that. So the letters would
A
actually
lot
get.
bigger than it actually will be.
Yep, the letters are actually a decent bit smaller than that, but they kind of run the whole length of that piece, which is why that sign gets quite big, because there's quite a bit of space between each letters. It's not a really condensed piece. There's a lot of space behind it, because we want to be able to see a mural that's sort of painted on the wall behind it.
And this is the building that's constructed there that we see today.
Correct, yep,
Facing Third.
yep.
Yeah.
And like I said, the intent previously was that was all going to be painted. It was going to be a mural of sorts, but we would like to see if we can do lit signage on that to kind of enhance that and make it a little bit more, prominent, kind of community pride signage piece.
Yeah, so you can see on these renderings. So I didn't include those renderings just because I thought that it didn't give you like the greatest perspective, just because the signs are significantly smaller than what that shows. That shows that it would run from the extent of the building all the way up to where those windows are, as you can see there. So they have made that a lot smaller. And this gives you the square footage percentage, or the square footage against the overall wall sign, or wall square footage.
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
So it looks like there's two different signs, Brandy, is that, or I guess I should ask.
Yep, they'll have Watertown arrows.
Watertown on one and Arrows on the other.
Yep.
Basically,
Yep.
so there's a gap between them.
Yep. And then there's a fairly big gap kind of between each of the letters too. It just kind of stretches out across that whole.
And what is that? Is that neon or how is that lit? I mean, is that black letters with lights?
The intent would that would be, and we could do it either way, whether it's block letters that are front lit, sort of facing out, similar to the Watertown or the athletic complex ones that we were looking at on top of that, or if we didn't want the face of that to actually illuminate and we wanted it to light back onto the building, we could do a reverse lit light like that as well. The idea of it is just to basically provide a little bit, some obviously lit letters that you spell Watertown Arrows, but then provide a little bit of light that just kind of lights up this sort of graphic mural piece as a.
Yeah, because that, of course, the picture again shows, is pretty obtrusive lighting.
Cor-
So there
yes,
again, I
yeah.
ask, would that be on all the time or would that be game night? And not,
Yeah,
I don't know that
It
matters,
is,
but.
it is facing the high school,
It is.
so it's not directly facing any kind of
Right, but
residential. area.
and as large as, like I said, the picture showed it, it would be really quite bright, the way it would appear, but
Yeah, Mr. Case.
Brandy, the calculation for the wall size is basically everything, the area from the actual letters themselves, if they were just blacked out themselves, would be less than the.
That's right.
800 square feet. It's just that they're spaced out over an area. So it makes it look like it's a bigger sign than it really is.
And honestly, because yeah, that's just how we take, but yeah, if I would have went each letter individually, it would be a lot less.
And this type of institutional use is a little bit different too. Like when you consider a school, it's a very large building. And so the same amount of signage would be much less of the percentage of the wall space. Because the majority of this land is open field, there's very little building space on it. So it's really not that much signage in total for the size of the lot. It's just got a very small building.
Yep.
Should have made the building bigger.
I wish.
Yeah, I'm just joking.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Taxpayers love that.
Excuse me, I guess I do have one question about, as Rhonda said, how bright it's going to be and how often it's going to be on.
Okay. As far as how often it's going to be on, I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I'll be honest, we haven't really talked about whether that's an every night, only a game day thing. I think that could be a discussion piece. I think the idea is that it would be on more often, just because it's kind of intended to be a, sort of a nice community focal point piece as you're kind of around there, between the high school and the athletic complex, and just kind of celebrating the Watertown Arrows. So I think the idea would be hopefully that it would be on more than just game days. And as far as how bright it is going to be, that image I think is pretty misleading, because those letters in that image actually weren't even supposed to be lit at that point. That was just supposed to be painted on there at that point. I would say, I think the letters on like the airport out there would probably be a fairly good representation of like how bright that is, the Watertown Regional Airport letters out there. But we could also look at doing it as a reverse lit letter where the letter itself does not shine forward and it just shines back onto the wall as well. So we'd be,
So the shadow lighting would be an option. Otherwise, I do have it in the motion that you would make sure, because that was something as far as usually a freestanding sign, if you're doing an electronic message center, you're 30 feet in the air or 30 feet in height. So with this one being lower on the building, being a wall sign, then we just wanted to, we added in there if you would make sure that the brightness level was kept to the same standard as an EMC, which is the 0.3 foot candles above ambient light. And so if there's ever question about it being too bright or that it's blocking views, the other thing is that it's not in the clear view triangle. It's 30 feet back from the property line. So it won't be an issue as far as the intersection goes, because it's 30 feet back from the 11th and 3rd.
Yeah, and tying it back to code that we've already got for the electronic message centers, I think is better than some ambiguous thing that we might, try to wordsmith something, right? This is actually in ordinance. It's already governing signs.
Like only lighted every other night.
Any other questions for the applicant here? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I do have the public hearing open if there's anybody else here to speak, either on behalf or against. Anybody in the room, anybody online? Okay, we'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve. Brandy, would you just put that back up there?
Yeah.
I'll just read it.
Yep.
So we'll take two separate board
Yep.
actions here.
Motion to approve
Are you
the
sure you wanna
appeal of
approve
the
them?
zoning ordinance prohibiting roof signs as an institutional use in the residential district pursuant to 21-8027, with the condition that engineered stamp plans are submitted verifying the roof and roof sign will meet international building code.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion on that item?
I'm making the motion solely to get it on the table. I will be voting against the motion based upon I don't think we should be variancing or approving something that is stipulated in ordinance that is prohibited. But I do think it's a good project. We need to find a solution for them.
I agree, and I'd like to see somewhere in ordinance that we can accommodate these with the proper engineering standards that makes it not a safety concern. So it sounds like we may be looking at, ordinance amendments in this area. Certainly would support that. Won't support the motion today to approve.
The ironic thing about our ordinance is that you can do a suspended, but you cannot do a roof. So you can have it suspended from, from a roof line, but not above. I suppose it gets less wind load. I don't know.
Any additional comments? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote on that.
All right. Brink,
No.
Kays,
No.
Dolly,
No?
Ford,
No.
Dargis Johnson,
No.
Culhane.
Yes.
5 no, 1 yes. That will fail. We'll need another board action for the other variance requests.
I'll make a motion to approve to allow 20% of the total wall. And with the condition that the brightness does not exceed 0.3 foot candles above ambient light pursuant to 21.0822.
We have a motion by Brink. Do you have a second? Second by Dargis Johnson. Discussion on this one?
I do think that we've come across the school and that zone before on parking and other things. I do think the school is a separate animal and it should have it, some slightly different rules in place as, 15-acre property could have a lot more wall than it does, and, parking requirements are different. I mean, we've come across this before on other ones too, and we've talked about needing a zone for it.
Campus zone, yeah.
Yep,
Yeah,
campus
that
zone.
definitely, Jeff. And even just through discussions that have been going on other topics, but we do need a zoning district for the campus-like uses. The other thing I wanted to bring up, to be fully transparent, is that if the overall wall signage is allowed to be greater than the 7.5%, we will actually bring a subsequent variance for the maximum allowable signage for this institutional use. Because right now it's 800 square feet, which they are slightly over, because it would just knock them out of being within the maximum allowed to. And that was an oversight on noticing.
Appreciate that, Brandy. Other comments? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote on this one as well.
All right, Culhane,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Brink,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Kays,
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes. That motion passes. That variance is approved. Thank you. Moving on to item 5B on the agenda is another set of variance requests related to an R3 multifamily residential district. Brandy, I'll let you take us through that one as well.
Okay, thank you, Blake. So this property is located at 1733 3rd Avenue Southwest. So this one, the background information, if hopefully you all read through, is it's complex. There's a lot of options and a lot of information. So apologize for that, but I will try to keep the this background brief. Jeff, did you have to leave?
I do have to pick up my daughter. I have a little bit of time. I'll let you know when I gotta go.
Okay, just don't leave her standing outside in the cold.
I will note, we will still have quorum if you depart, Jeff, because we have Liam online.
Okay, sorry about that. So let me pull this up here. All right, so this is the location. They have replatted, so the footprint of this lot is about 37,000 square feet, so just under an acre. You can see there's the foundation fields to the west, and then the stadium actually is to the north. So there's open field owned by the Watertown School District, and then to the north there is Burchatz Construction, and then on the south there are the some multifamily units. This area is all zoned R3 multifamily residential. So what the applicant is proposing is a single-family residence with a very large attached garage, which it does exceed the allowable size, and that is what one of the variances here today is for your consideration, is up for your consideration. And then also the number of garage stalls. Now, things as far as the hardship goes, I can let the applicant speak to that, but there are things with the neighborhood that are compelling to it as to what this property could be utilized for. And so I spelled that out on in the last paragraph, where if it is R3, as far as density goes, they could have apartment unit where they could have 28 one bedroom or 21 2-bedroom units. And so the applicant owns the 4 properties to the west, to the east. Wow, I'm turned around today. Getting all my cardinal directions wrong. Okay. So I'll pull it up here on GIS for your reference. Maybe. Oh, it's by Cook Complex. Okay. Yeah, so that's the backside of Cook Complex, my bad. So this is the property here, and then the applicant owns the 4 properties to the east. So then there was a replat done that took some of the existing property to the east there under the same ownership and added that onto this lot here. Now, as far as what is being proposed for the structure, now let me go back here, make sure I get, I'll just use my packet here. And then, so I'll pull up this on the overhead so you guys can reference the actual construction drawing proposal. So on that south side is where the living quarter will be. And then the garage portion goes towards the north, where the proposed garage size is to be 5,968 square feet. And in a residential district, you can have an attached garage that is 23,352 square feet. And then you could have a detached garage, depending on your lot size. There's different thresholds there. And for the size of lot that there is today, the 37,337 square feet, they could have a 1,859 square foot unattached garage. So then you can combine your unattached garage with your attached garage and take the difference away from having a detached structure. Thought process behind that is really bulk and density. So when you are in a residential district, you can have a large footprint of a house and there are no restrictions as long as you're meeting your setbacks. We're okay with that being added to an attached garage, and then you just take away your ability to have a detached garage, which is allowed to be closer to property lines. This is still an attached structure, so it has to have the same primary setbacks as the primary structure. So then in total, the garage without any variance request could be 4,219 square feet, which still would leave them short 1,767.25 square feet of what the proposed garage is. Another thing as far as what could have been done without a variance request is, and I actually show that on the agenda packet, is taking some of the backlot property of the lots to the east and then adding that square footage into this existing lot. And so on the background here, I explained how really the best case scenario would be taking this maroon hatch portion. The green hatch portion shows like the extent to how much property they could take with not making the other lots non-conforming. But it actually doesn't serve any purpose. And you might as well leave that with the other lots so that they can do detached structures or whatnot there, have a backyard. And then this blue hatch portion would also be included. So the blue and the maroon is what would have to be taken to get the best case scenario for how large of a garage they could do without a variance. However, this is not ideal for subdivision, but it also, with the property owner owning those properties, would be allowed by ordinance. And then it also does, this kind of a give and take. So it takes away property that could be developed for the properties on the east, or they all can be left as is, and then wherever the board lands with the variance request in front of you. So with all of these properties adjacent, they would be left with still being 131 square feet short of what is being proposed. But I have a feeling that would be manageable, being that close. And then the other variance, like I stated, is the garage doors / stalls. You can only have 3 per side, 3 garage stalls or doors facing one side. And so then they do have 4 facing the east, which is also facing the applicant's residence or property under their same ownership. So with all that information, I will stand by for any questions.
Brandy, if this was a conditional use for storage units, would this meet the definition of storage units?
As long as they were less than or equal to 600 square feet each. They would have to, when you're in R3 district, multifamily units are permitted. So they could ask for the conditional use of storage units, but it's going to be, I believe, for personal storage. So not quite meeting the exact district or definition of storage units. However, we don't really, if he wanted to rent all of them out, we wouldn't govern that.
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
getting back to that maybe line of thinking, if I was to build an 8-plex or a 12-plex there, am I still limited to the same amount of garage space on the lot, whether it's a multiple family dwelling or whether it's a single family dwelling?
No.
I mean, if I was going to go out and build X number of units and have garages to store those cars or what have you, I could have garages, I could have total garage space exceeding 6,000 square feet.
Yes, yeah.
If this was a multiple family request. So that's what the ordinance allows for in this area. It's just that because this is a single family request, I'm limited to the size of the garage on the site. Thank you.
And does that question go for the number of garage doors as well as the square footage?
All of it, yeah, but good points, honestly. because when we talk about, because have never regulated it. Like you look at the plains, it's all just like incidental. Because you have many garage doors and those are not varianced because it's R3. It's multifamily, but yeah, because this use is single family in nature.
I'm just trying to equate an R3 property. This lot could develop into X number of units, and they could have X number of garages, which would exceed 6,000 feet, and which would also have more garage doors than the 4 that would be associated with this request.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Brandy, how is this not different than a contractor shop? I mean, basically with living quarters in it. We don't allow this to happen in the county, but we would allow this in town, which I've never figured out. But, so how is this different than this just being a contractor shop in the middle of R3?
So they still have to have it residentially sided. I don't like that a house or a house are regulated differently. I know the county does it with the type of foundation they have. But as far as if you want a box, if you want 4 walls and a small living quarter, who are we to judge? As long as it's residentially sided and it looks,
But we
and has
don't
that
allow
residential neighbor.
But we don't allow that.
The distinguishing thing is you can do that in the county if it's residentially sided. You can't do it if it's steel sided.
Okay.
That's the difference.
And if you're in a residential district, it has to be residentially sided in town. So we never, we don't regulate.
How big your house is versus how big.
No,
Okay. But contractor shops are not allowed in R3?
right. But you also can't live in a contractor shop.
So tell me what the difference is here then.
They have living quarters that are permitted.
They basically have a small house attached to a very large garage.
And it's also not a very small house.
I mean, in reference to the garage is a relationship, but if I build a house and I put a big, stub nose garage on the front end and it's a 3-stall garage in the front and I've got maybe I only got 1,200 square feet on the back, we don't regulate that either.
I mean, it's a large lot. You got to think of perspective too. It's almost an acre where typically a lot is 9,000 square feet.
What is the usage as far as the lot, what they're proposing versus, is it 20% coverage? What's the lot coverage here?
I might just need a moment to cook.
Sorry.
Because you can have, okay, and then this is in my way, the top bar there. You can have up to 80% of lot coverage, which we're not there. I can tell you that. Okay, what is going on?
I mean, realistically, they're asking for a 6,000 square foot garage. I don't know how big the house part of that is. And you've got over an acre, so I mean, it's still a very small percentage of the lot. It's less than 20% easy.
But the garages are probably going to be rented out, so therefore it's.
No, this is for his own personal use. My understanding is I'm going to live there. I'm just going to have a big garage just because I've got lots of toys.
And they also can't be rented
Right.
out unless he would get a conditional use for storage units.
Chair,
Yep.
it does,
1,200 square foot of living quarters.
on page 24, it does, in the drawing, it does call them shops.
Anybody can call a area of their garage a shop as well. So I typically do too. I got a
Right.
wood shop in my garage.
But it might be helpful too, to get the applicant, some of these questions that they could answer.
Yeah, I'll open the public hearing in just a second, Brandy. We do have in a couple areas of our code some guidelines around sidewall articulation. Does any of that apply to this type of structure in this location?
It doesn't.
Thank you.
No, we have the sidewall articulation in the RG district. But those are all conditions that could be made.
I will open the public hearing at this time, if the applicant's here and wants to speak.
Sure. So my name is John Knight, and I represent the applicant, Travis Youthy. Can I go forward, or do you have some questions first?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so by means of introduction, I just want to say I'm a lawyer. For the past more than 30 years, I've had to attend Planning and Zoning Commission meetings every month. And so I've sat through a lot of these. I'm not saying that because I think I'm an expert. I'm saying that because I appreciate how difficult it is to adopt these ordinances, and I appreciate how rewarding it is for you members to tell people what they can do with their property. So with that in mind, I just want to say that the zoning ordinances tend to be very arbitrary. You try to draft these, you set these, rules that are going to apply to property, and obviously, in some cases, you have unique pieces of property that the rules really don't apply very well to. I think that this is an example of that. That's why we have variances that allow you to relax the rules. And I think that this is a perfect example of why you have a variance. So if I can, Brandy, I'd like to show the photos of the actual properties adjacent to it.
Yeah,
Can
I
you bring
just-
those photos up, or do I need to?
No, I actually had them up, but I don't know what happened here.
So first, I'd like to show the picture of Travis's house, which is directly to the east of the property.
Okay, that one.
Yes, so that's Travis's house, and obviously, he built that house there in this neighborhood. Across the street from his house is a very large apartment building, and in the immediate area are 15 to 20 very large apartment buildings.
I think you have a picture of that, right?
I did not bring a picture of that because it shows up on your overhead photos.
Yep.
So if we go directly then to the east of Travis's house,
East.
that would be this house here.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. This house here.
Okay.
Yeah, so Travis owns this property. That's the backyard of that property is part of the property that he could use.
So this is his property here. This is this property that we're looking at?
Correct, yep.
All right, so then so this is,
And then directly to the east of that property is this property, if you can bring up that photo. And then directly to the east of that is
so then
the
that one
blue
is right
property, this
here,
one.
and then this is this property.
Yeah, so just, the purpose of that is to give you a visual of that, and Travis has purchased those properties and fixed those all up. Then I want to show you on the back side of these properties, if you'll bring up the photo of the school's garage.
I think that,
Yes, I want to see the side view. So this is the building that adjoins Travis's backyard.
right here, right?
Yep. And part of the purpose of that is to point out the fact that that building happens to have 5 garage doors. And then for the backyard of the property that he wants to build the garage on, which would be the Burchett's, this is a picture of that. And so you can see that this is a quasi, what I would say, industrial, residential, R3 property, and it certainly isn't your typical residential area. So with that, we're suggesting that this property that he's requesting the variance for is less intrusive and a better alternative to, other uses that you would have for a conditional use. For example, storage. And Rhonda, for your purposes, the main difference, I think, between this and a contractor shop is, one, it is living, it's a residential property, and two, it's not going to be rented out. It's not going to have people coming and going. It isn't going to be having stuff have various uses that are undefined. It's strictly a personal use for somebody that lives next door to it and takes good care of the property. So in that way, there's less traffic, less noise, less garbage. Generally speaking, much less disturbance to the surrounding neighborhood. And certainly more, less detrimental, to use your language, but a more positive impact on the neighborhood than another apartment building or a storage building with multiple garage doors. So we think that replatting it to get a building of essentially the same size is a hardship that makes no sense. I mean, if you look at this building and you think it's going to be there, but we're going to make him replat it to give him enough area that the zoning requires, that accomplishes nothing and is not a very good use of the property. So we don't think that, I mean, there's a tendency to say this is really big and we're thinking about the size, but really I think the emphasis should be on how does it affect the surrounding property owners, and what ultimately is the difference between building a 4,000 square foot garage and a 6,000 square foot garage. And in this area, it's not going to make a bit of difference to anybody. But to minimize that impact, Travis has already planted several evergreens on the street side. So the garage doors don't face the street, they'll face his house. The living quarters do face the street. It's going to be screened by these evergreens. On his own property, he has several mature evergreens in front. I'm not sure that those show up well in the photo, but
I think I have that, the view kind of.
yeah. So that will help screen the property. So I guess maybe one last comment is that he already has some stuff stored on the property. When he hopefully gets this variance, he'll be able to put that stuff inside, which I think also is a positive thing for the neighborhood. So certainly within your authority, unlike, you know, the last thing that you were struggling with, it isn't something that's prohibited, and we think that it's an ideal location for this kind of a structure and a much more appropriate use than some of the other uses we already see there. So for that reason, we hope you grant the variance.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
John, would your client object to a condition that would stipulate that once the garage in the house was built, that the fenced-in area storing those, looks like to be old cars and automobiles, would either be stored inside the building or removed from that property? I mean, right now, you can't, it's not much of a difference to the Burchatts property to the north, but if we're talking about cleaning up the area and making it still residentially and minimizing or mitigating the industrial impact of that neighborhood, is that something that you would consider not being objectionable to?
You know, I built that fence just a few years ago.
So, Travis, if you could just come up to the microphone and then state your name for the record, please.
My name is Travis Youthy. I did come and get a permit and built that fence a few years ago because I didn't want it to be an eyesore. I didn't want it to look like, now I will tell you that there's some wood piles there that I need to get cleaned up. It's just a matter of getting them cut to length and split. We burn wood in our home, but I guess a lot of those cars that are in there are either gonna go away, go to junk, or go inside. I'm not sure that tearing the fence down, that's only a few years old, I wouldn't like to say that I would do that, but I would tell you that I would, that.
I'm more concerned about the vehicles and,
Yes.
and that aspect of it.
Yes, correct.
Mr. Chair, one other question for the applicant. We noticed, that there are intensive uses on both the south and north side of the property, and you own the properties to the east. Have you talked to your neighbor to the west?
I've talked to both of them, and we actually have signed documents that they're in support of this project.
Thank you.
Those were submitted. Brandy, did you have those as part of your presentation?
I can get out of the way here.
Not like on the agenda, but I did pull them up so we can reference them.
Are you aware, are there any easements on this property, access or otherwise?
No easements, he says.
Here are the two from Starzl and Julius that they are aware and consent, which is not required.
Right.
Adjacent property owners, we don't like to give them power over somebody else's property if something gets approved or not, but it is nice to know that they don't care because we did not hear from them as staff.
Thank you. Is there other questions for the applicants?
Chair.
Yep.
So, so Youthy, I assume, is going to rent that out, and so the tenant will park in one of the stalls?
Again, this is Travis Youthy. It will not be rented. No part of this property, proposed property, will be rented. It will be all for my own use.
And then you're going to have 7 doors?
That drawing is incorrect. That was a very early drawing. There will not be doors on the north side. So there will be 4 doors. The request is for 4 doors on the east-facing side.
And you're aware that that would have to be hard surface to those all the way back?
Correct, yes, and I would want that.
Thank you.
Brandy, question for you in relation to the school's property to the north. Are you aware of how that structure was permitted?
No, I'm not. Yeah. I could look back.
That's fine.
It exists as legal nonconforming.
Yep.
But it also has metal siding on that southern building. So that is also nonconforming.
Other questions for the applicant? Thank you. I do have the public hearing open if anybody else is here to speak on behalf or against, or if there's anybody online. Okay, we'll close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have 2 separate board actions to take on this item. The first is for the allowable attached garage area, the square footage. Is your motion for the first?
Yeah, motion to approve the allowable attached garage area.
Okay, we have that motion. and a
Second. I'll second.
Any discussion on that before we take a vote?
I do think this area is different than most R3 and just with how it's configured next to an industrial and both the football stadium and the softball complex kind of renders this a unique land that, would make this work.
I think also that the fact that the applicant owns the adjoining properties to the east and understands the potential conflicts are mitigated through that, and also while we don't necessitate the signatures, the neighbors do not seem to be against the proposal.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
So to that, that's one thing I get hung up on a lot is we always say, well, I own the property next door. That isn't always going to be the case, just like last week. I mean, he owns them now, but it's going to be in someone else's hands someday unless, his son.
But
ends
you
up-
know what you're
know I'm
buying when
saying?
you're buying.
I
see
know,
there's a big-
but that's not an excuse to give a variance because I own all the property around it, Todd. That's all I'm saying. Just because I own my neighborhood doesn't mean I should get to do whatever I want in it because someday it's not going to be my neighborhood. That's all I'm saying. And again, so someone else is going to own this property someday. So let's not base it on the fact that Travis owns next door. That doesn't matter to me.
I'm not saying that, Brenda, excuse me, Rhonda, all I'm trying to say is that I think the impact to the neighborhood is lessened because of what's there, whether that be property owned by Mr. Youthy or the property that's much more intensively used by the school district and Burchatts out to the north. And there are a lot of larger buildings, apartment buildings to the south. So I think, to me, I say it fits the neighborhood much to what the maker of the motion has stated.
True. However, again, it borderlines on contractor shop in my book, and just because of the size of it and the size of the property that's living there. I mean, the living quarters based on the garage size. That's where I struggle.
I think, you know, one other aspect to consider with the comparison to contractor shops, though, is, you know, this will have to be constructed to a residential standard in terms of the look and feel of it, to better fit within the neighborhood, so.
And they
While I
can,
do agree with you in terms of the size, that is a consideration.
they also cannot run commercial businesses out of it. And if that would be taking place and there was a complaint basis, yeah, that would just not be allowed. We'd have to get Terry on them.
Can I respond to that just
Angles.
briefly?
I do have the public hearing closed at this time.
All right.
Terry Ingles, the code enforcement officer, is who I was referencing there.
Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just thinking of these oversized garage doors. While we have apartments and that kind of thing, the whole structure, to me, while I'm being told it fits nicely into the environment here, complements it, I'm struggling with that. The oversized garage doors, 4 of them. As Rhonda said, these houses here may or may not always belong to the same person. We have people across the street who expect their neighborhood not to be affected too much by our decisions, and I'm just struggling with the size of this project. Not only the size of the project, but the size of the detail. For instance, the garage doors, and the number of the garage doors, 4. It is very commercial to me. I feel
Is somebody
very-
online?
It's me.
Yeah, no, I was this.
So I'm just, I just am thinking of the apartments, people come and go, that's sure, but they still deserve a neighborhood-friendly environment, and this project isn't giving me that.
I think it would be a
struggling
little
with
bit
that.
different if it was actually for commercial use, though. So because this is going
Yes.
to not, commercial use is not going to be allowed in this project. So it's the size of something you would typically see for commercial use. But
Right.
it's not allowed to be used commercially. So it should be less disruptive to the neighborhood
Mr.
than if we had a corresponding storage units or contractor shops in the location.
Mr. Chair, I'm just thinking from the perspective that if I'm living in those apartments, I walk out the front door, I look to the north, I see Ron Burchess as a development site, and this building will now shield that from the view of those people that are living in that apartment complex to the south. I think that's a benefit to the neighborhood as well.
Yeah, I
Well,
have no doubt
is
that
a
it will
good
look
to- a
look
good
better.
point, Todd.
One thing, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Liam.
The current action in front of us is for the square footage, correct?
It is for the square footage, yep.
And in theory, they could build the square footage or roughly the same square footage that they're requesting in a permitted fashion if they replat, correct?
Close to, yep.
But we end up with a very absurd result, right? We end up with a really strange lot size that actually further create problems later on when it's not kind of an ownership. So as it relates to this particular variance, it seems like this makes the most sense to me in terms of just a simple common sense solution. Because for the exact same reason Rhonda pointed out, we're not gonna have common ownership in perpetuity. So if we deny this particular building, and he says, all right, well, I'm gonna replat it to this goofy L-shaped lot, build it anyways, maybe not with as many garage doors, we end up with a bigger mess, frankly, than if we would just allow the variance as it relates to the floor frontage.
I just wanted to point out too, I did find the information about the school storage units. So they received a conditional use in 2017 to have the storage units, and apparently, well, that is residentially sided, but it's also, there's no paved driveway to the units. But that conditional use, and I have not pulled up the minutes of what was discussed. I can do that too if you guys want.
Well, and I would prefer not going in the direction of a storage unit because that allows for commercial use again. They could sublet it. I think, coming into this, looking at this today, I have a different perspective now than when I got here, I'll say. I was not a fan of the size of the structure, but when considering the other potential uses of this property, more commercial type uses that are going to be more intrusive, the fact that this has restrictions, that it can't be commercially used and that it's going to be for personal use, to me, it feels like it is probably the better option.
And I'll agree, and Liam scared me when he got his yardstick out, so. And I get it, I mean, we could make him jump through more hoops and have the odd-shaped lot to get this. It's just, it's just always that can of worms that I'm always afraid of opening,
Yeah.
and that's,
Other comments while we have the discussion going? Yeah, so let's go ahead and take a roll call vote on that.
Okay, Brink.
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
Culhane.
Yes?
Dargis Johnson.
yes.
Dolly.
Yes?
Kays.
Yes.
All in favor? So that passes. We need another board action, motion for the number of garage doors
Mr.
facing
Chair.
one side.
Do we need to talk about that?
We'll need a motion first.
Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion to approve the 4,
We had one public hearing for that.
Whole thing?
Yep.
make a motion to
Oh.
approve the 4 doors on the east side of the property. However, I also would like to add a caveat that the applicant removes the outdoor storage of those vehicles behind the fence. The fence can stay, but either they go into the building or they go somewhere else. So we are trying to better the look of the neighborhood.
A second.
Motion a second. Discussion on this motion before we take a vote?
I didn't realize the public hearing included both, and I didn't get a chance to ask, why do we need 4 garage doors instead of 3?
Apologies, I'll open for a moment and allow you to respond to the question from Diana here regarding the number of doors.
Yeah, so primarily it's because he has multiple vehicles and is going to be having multiple vehicles. It's part of the design of the building. You get the same building and the same effect without 4 doors, except that it's much harder to get in and out of the building, much harder to move stuff around in the building. Because it faces the east, we don't think it has any impact. Adding, it's kind of like what difference is it really gonna make between 3 doors and 4 doors for anybody? And, again, across the boundary line, you've got another garage with 5 doors. And so, for that reason, we just don't think it makes sense to build this structure with 3 doors because you have a large area of it then that, you're not going to be able to utilize for the purpose of it, or it'll certainly make it more difficult to utilize that property. The garage doors aren't that big. I mean, they sound big, but I noticed when Brandy or whoever prepared the summary, they referred to standard garage door being 8 to 9 foot. I I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I know when I built my garage, the lumberyard said I needed 10-foot wide garage doors. These are 12-foot wide. I
That
don't
was
think,
according to Google.
yeah, okay. You know, I just don't think that there's really any consequence there at all. But it does lessen the utility of the building if you limit it to 3 doors, and for no practical reason, really. So again, somebody came up, I mean, they had a good reason, I know, to come up with the idea of you shouldn't have 4 garage doors. But I think that that is primarily because garage doors generally face the street. And it does create a little bit more of a aesthetic problem to have a small house with 4 garage doors facing the street. And it exposes that whole area to the curbside. But here, they don't face the street, and nobody's really gonna know that there's 4 garage doors there. I mean, honestly, the neighbors won't ever see them, so.
Thank you, sir. I'll close the public hearing. So we have a motion on the table for the 4 garage doors. Any additional comments? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote.
Okay, let's go Dargis Johnson.
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes?
Kays.
Yes.
Brink.
Yes.
Colhane.
Yes.
All in favor? So that carries as well. Yep, thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
We'll move on to item 6 is open public comments. I don't believe there's anybody here to speak on an item that wasn't on the agenda today, so we'll move on to item 7A, which is new business.
Yeah, just real quick here, a couple items. So the Planning Commission and Board of Adjustment member appointments through our new administration ordinance amendment that we brought forward is effective. And that also outlines that the mayor will make appointments for board members at the first council meeting in December, which is just Monday, December 2nd at 5:30. So hopefully he has been in contact with you all. We do have to send the list that I will receive before the end of the day tomorrow that we'll send out to the city council as part of our policy, that they receive notification 10 days in advance. So that will be coming up. And then something also to take into consideration is your terms will still go to, until the end of the year. And then the new board will start their new terms with however the different seats are allocated, because when you're starting over with a new board or just resetting terms, there's different staggers of like somebody has 2 terms, some are at 3 terms, and then we'll stick to the actual term and term limits that we've set in that administration ordinance. So everyone will still stay on until December, and to be determined where that all shakes out. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up there.
In terms of elections, then, is that the first meeting in January?
Yes, or the second. Let me reference that. Sorry. I've been dealing with a lot of ordinance amendments, so I'm just not quite as crisp on that as I should be.
And that's fine, so, but it's going to be in January then, either the first or the second meeting.
Yeah. I feel like we maybe put it at January, or at the end of January for election. Okay. Let me just. Okay. Yep, so the first meeting of January.
First meeting, okay.
Such planning commission shall elect its chairman and vice chairman from among its members for a term of 1 year with eligibility for reelection not to exceed 3 consecutive years. The election shall take place. Okay. Yeah, so I didn't know if maybe I was thinking there might have been discussion that we put it at the second meeting, just so everyone could kind of get their bearings with one meeting. But no, we'll get you on and have you
ground
make hard
running.
decisions right away.
All right.
Litigation.
There's one other item here under new business, title ordinance amendment introduction.
Yeah, so I will be emailing out where we're at. This is a large compilation of Title 21. It includes the residential height and placement setback, the chart, and then for accessory structures, for residential accessory structures. And then it goes through all of the zoning districts, different definitions for describing dwelling units. I have a presentation that I put together that I will bring forward to the board on December 5th that will go through as actual business during the planning commission meeting. I just wanted to bring this up at least for new business. Obviously, we don't have any items for planning commission today, and we're still as board of adjustment. So, but I did want to at least let you guys know that we'll have discussion on December 5th, but then I'm going to email all of the packet of all the ordinance amendments, just the verbiage for you guys to start digesting. I'm going to send that out tomorrow. So this is a heads up so that you guys have the chance, digest it before the December 5th, gives you 2 weeks to kind of have an idea, and then things to bring up that you find as a concern or have questions about, or, just anything that way. Also, in that 2 weeks, do not hesitate to email me any of your comments or concerns. You can mark it up and send me anything. I really do appreciate the heads up and things that if I can address it before we even have discussion, great. But we won't be voting on it until the second meeting in December.
Okay.
So,
The intention is, though, that we have this board act on these changes before the end of the year.
yep,
So you're thinking that on the 5th, we would come in, and if there's any tweaking or tweak that comes out of that meeting, that'll be incorporated into the public hearing 2 weeks hence then?
yeah. So in theory, then, it gives you guys a month to kind of digest it. And even before we have the presentation, and everyone has busy schedules too, especially it's the holidays. So if you don't have the time, I'm going to give the presentation to give you a good overview of all of the major changes. And the thing about these ordinance amendments, they're not major. I'd like to do some major ones, but there's housekeeping that I'd like to clean up of variances that we've seen come forward, and just all around to, just ease of administration for things that we've already approved as a Board of Adjustment multiple times. And then to also offer additional guidance. So I feel confident about the ordinance amendments that are being proposed, that it's not, and I was also cautious that we weren't throwing a lot of information at the board in efforts to at least get the things that we know don't work buttoned up and amended. And then we can come with some things that might be great solutions, like additional zoning districts, those types of things, but not including them with
Okay.
this overhaul. But it is a lot of information, so.
Yeah, and given that, especially with a tight time frame, and then the potential for new members coming on in January, I just, I'll try to make a point myself to review it as soon as possible and get you any of my notes in advance, so I'm not just springing them on you in the meeting. Just encourage everybody to kind of do the same. Whatever time you have, if you can, permit some time to it.
Yep. And for sure, like I said, if you guys have the ability before the December 5th meeting, great. But there might be things that spark questions during my presentation if you don't get a chance to go through it, because going through ordinance is not something that it's not exciting, or something that you really want to spend your time doing while you're already being a volunteer for the board. So, you can totally wait until the presentation. I'll try to make it very straightforward and lay out those changes and have time for questions. And then obviously, if there's things that come from that meeting, then I will get those changed before bringing it forward for action on the December 19th, I believe.
Okay. Sounds great.
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
just one quick update for the public and for those of us on the Planning Commission and Board of Adjustment. The CL committee is made the decision on Monday of this week that we are going to meet every Monday from 3 to 5 between now and the end of the year to try to bang out some recommended suggestions for the Commercial Lake District. Those meetings are open to the public. They're basically a work session of the 5 or 6 of us that have been talking about this forever and a day. And, more than welcome to attend those as well. But we are getting to the point where we're, the rubber is meeting the road, and we're at least talking about if we allow X use, under what condition. And those would be, then hopefully the intent would be to have that to the Planning Commission and the City Council in January.
Yeah, and for the members of the public, those meetings are on the agenda center. They're out on the
They're
city's
also
website.
televised, I think, yeah.
Yep. Okay, any other new business?
No, none that I have.
Any old business?
Nope.
I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.